Hi, Suzanne. Second time is a charm getting our project up on here, huh? I'm assuming I said your name correctly based on how it's spelled, but let me know if it's actually Susan. So let's go ahead and take a look at your design. It's so much easier seeing it this way. Okay, good. All right, well, you have a few things that I instantly like. I like this page. I like how you have some simple choices in the background in terms of not too much going on, um, which helps kind of the writing and your typography choices and some of your subheading choices stand out, which is really nice. So let's go ahead and start with your first page. Um, First of all, I will say this is not a font I love. It's one that is used a lot. I think it'd be really nice if you could use something different. Perhaps you could download something from dafont.com. Let me take you there. I went over how to download those fonts in my previous video for the announcements. So you can look at under Basic, Sans Serif or Serif, or under Script, Handwritten or Brush. Probably something in handwritten would be somewhat similar to what you're using. Something like this, see how it's not too different, but I can't remember the name of this font. I wish I could, but it's not going to be one that everyone looks at who's in marketing or reads a lot of magazines and has seen it, hundreds of times. So that's going to add some visual interest to your design. The other thing is I'd love to see a little bit more contrast within your title. You're off to a good start by having this being so large and then Neil A. Anderson small. However, it'd be awesome to have some contrast within, perhaps find our cousins even, okay? So envision if you're using a font like this and maybe cousins is in this font, and then find our could be in a cool sans serif like this, a thick, cool sans serif. Okay, so envision something like that. Maybe you have find, R, and then cousins underneath it large. Now, Neil A. Anderson, be sure you hit enter right here between the two A's, is kind of just a little bit oddly placed. Remember the rule of alignment. You want him to be aligned with something. So the N on his name, it might look a little weird to have it aligned with the top of this apostrophe. So I'd probably align it with this dot right here and tuck his name up there. Take a look at some of these good examples here that we have in the assignment. See how the title has a lot going on with it. This is really large, all caps, and then down here is a sans serif opposite of this. There's an ampersand in the background, and then this is left aligned nice and tidy underneath the U in that same font, but smaller. See how much visual interest there is in just the heading. There's not a lot of crazy colors. It's the typography that's standing so strong. This is also a great example. Look how you have 3 different colors. You have 2 different typefaces, but it's all justified. It starts at the same place, it ends at the same place. Really nice, crisp, and clean. Okay, so that's kind of the thing that I want to see going on with this. You're starting by having contrasting typefaces, but we want to make it even more dynamic. We want to find the message in the typography for the title. Because the order of operations, if you will, when you look at a magazine page, is you want the images to be the very first thing you look at, then the title, then you want to be compelled to read by the typefaces. All right, your columns are looking good. They're nice and tidy. Be sure to turn off your hyphens. Okay, those are turned on and we always want to turn those off. On your subtitles, notice how you have more space between the top of the T and the line than the bottom of the T and the line. All right, so move this top down a little bit so it's as close to being exact as you can get it. And then do that for each of these. See, this one's way different. There's a little bit of space and then there's a ton of space. And tiny, tiny things like make sure this line is actually aligned with the edge of the W and the edge down here. So it's perfectly aligned. And then another thing is that I like how you have these colors down here. This is nice. I like this yellow a lot. You could think about using that yellow for your subtitles for the lines and this, and that would be a little reminiscent of these titles, which look so, so nice. So that might give you some inspiration. I would love to see these in a different typeface too, perhaps. Although they're so bold, I'm actually okay if you really, really like it, keeping it like this, but this color would be really cool. Another principle is that if you have a shape that is almost off the edge of the page, make it look even modern, way more clean and crisp by pulling it all the way off the page. All right, we want full bleeds. Look how nice that looks. That shape just going all the way off. It looks so modern. It looks really, really nice and clean. Your eye just flows right off the edge of the page. Okay, and even look at this white shape. This is a white shape on top of this teal background. It flows all the way off. It looks really, really nice because you have that element of flow. So any shapes you have, you want to allow that to happen. I'm okay with you not doing it with these because these are a part of the subheadings, but any other shape on the page, if it's almost to the edge, make it go all the way off, including this background. Now, let's talk about this image. This image is pretty problematic because it's creating total illegibility for your columns. Now, maybe what your plan is to do a text wrap because oh, you have a text wrap down here. Yeah, you could do a text wrap here. I don't love the black and the white, to be honest. This is not a very compelling color story on your intro page. So let's talk about color. You have only color on 3 words. We discover ancestors, which is cool. I like that you made those the colors that stand out, or those the words that stand out with these colors. But let's add some more color story to it. You can keep the black and the gray, that's good, but let's add in this yellow so it reoccurs. Maybe it's on cousins, or maybe it's this gray background. Instead of being all gray, maybe you make it this yellow color, and it's only on the top third of the page. And then maybe these trees are actually the green, and maybe they have a little bit of yellow in there, and they're down here on the bottom with a text wrap around it. I will say this shape is big. Ovals tend to be a little bit dated looking unless they're done really, really well. So I would say it'd look more contemporary to go with a square shape. So let's envision you have this tree and it's colorful and it goes all the way off the page. It's a nice square. It follows the rule of thirds and goes all the way down this side of the page. So you have a beautiful green and yellow tree right here. And then find our cousins, perhaps, is right aligned in really neat font with a white background. And then you have maybe 3 paragraphs. And I would urge you to probably bring these paragraphs over so they aren't quite so close to the edge of the page. Let me show you even these. See how this is a good amount of space, but the other example is really, really nice. See how much space there is between the edge of the column and the edge of the page. There's so much white space on here. And there's even a good amount of white space up on this title page, which is a full image. Okay, so maybe I'd pull these columns so they're not quite so close to the edge. And or you could crop this image long ways and have the tree run all the way across the top, and then find our cousins could be on top of the tree image, or right underneath it, with 2 smaller columns down underneath here, or maybe you have 2 paragraphs on the right hand side of the page and your image running on this left hand. Okay, so I don't love that the image is centered because we're trying to break away from centering things. We're trying to push ourselves to do right alignment, left alignment, and do something different that isn't the default. This is off to a good start because you have some of the balancing elements working. You have a big circle down here, and then you have your title up here. It does look a little bit awkward from a shape perspective because your subheading had to be bumped up here. And so maybe you could pull this column down so the column starts at the same line as my And then you could end it with this wrapping around this paragraph, wrapping around this image. Or you could take off the circle and you could see if it looks good as a triangular shape or just a nice square that's a full bleed. I'm okay if you leave the circle, but it's just creating some weird shapes down here. So look at the shapes of the negative space and see if there's a way that you can make it look more tidy and more crisp and more clean. Kind of like, oh, they have something like that kind of here, huh? Maybe it's helpful because there's a little bit more space here, or there's a little bit more space up here. So yours is pretty similar to this actually. So model this page a little bit more after the design of this one. Okay, try to scoot this a little bit to the right perhaps, and see if just making a few of those small adjustments is going to help it feel a little bit more tidy. And then one thing I will say is for Thomas S. Monson, it seems like his name is just floating down there all by itself. So I would move him up following that rule of proximity. I would add a period here inside ancestors. Ancestors. Is this spelled right? I don't know if it's ES. Just check on that for me. I could be just not thinking about it right. And it might look nice to have, well, nope, that's going to get weird because then you only have, you could start your column up here and have a kind of cool line coming down. Ooh, it would look kind of neat to have, if this is a full bleed going off, you could have your two columns, pull them in a little bit so they're a little bit more narrow, add a little bit more space in between them, especially these lines, they're sticking out a little bit too much, way too close to this column. You could have this column start at the exact same place and end at the exact same place. See how this line is kind of standing out? It looks a little bit weird. And they could kind of be cut off maybe by this shape a little bit, which would be neat to have this column, you know, run into the space and be cut off by a text wrap with that shape. Okay. And then keep on thinking about color. Let's figure out a way to get a little bit more color in there. You don't have to. I'm okay with it being used sparingly, but we want to, usually there's at least a rule of threes. You want something to repeat 3 times. You don't ever want one design element to only show up once. If it's something as dramatically different as yellow and everything else black and white, we want it to be super intentional. Okay, feel free to email me a second draft if you want to. I know I've given you a lot of different directions you can go, so sometimes you get to the next step and it's a little bit hard to figure out what few remaining things you have left to do. Okay, so thanks for your submission and good luck this week.